Okay, it's been 24 hours and it is very dry and ready to go. Luckily we have pretty hot weather, 80s, mid 80s, and no humidity. We haven't had rain, measurable rain, in at least 2 months. But anyway, so I flipped it over and you can see that some of the plywood got ripped off because the 2x4 was glued to it, but you can see that's going to be part of the cutout. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to drill me a couple of pilot holes with my 3/4 inch paddle bit right here, and I'm going to get my jigsaw out and cut out the keyhole. This is going to do two things. Obviously cut out your keyhole and for the outdrive. It's also going to tell us how good our bond is between the two layers. Some people cut it out whenever it's inside the boat. I like cutting it out like this, and I'll cut right on the line, and then if I need to adjust it by grinding or anything like that when I have it in the boat, I will. And then you drill the holes after you've already glued it. So here's my big dilemma right now. Obviously clamping, whenever you put it in, you've got to clamp it to the back to make sure that you've got a good adhesion to the back of the boat. Well, I can clamp within about a foot or so either side of the keyhole, just like we did here, because then you've got this side. But how do you clamp the rest of this? You got to be able to clamp this or push enough pressure up against the side of the what do you call it, the hull. So a couple of things I was thinking about is possibly going and getting a couple of concrete bags and then leaning, once I put it in there, clamp this side and then put a whole bunch of concrete bags leaning up against it. That may do it. I'm not quite sure. It seems to be the best idea so far. Also, while I have this like this, I'm going to take my belt sander and I'm going to go around the entire thing, round off all the edges, make it nice and smooth. So that way when we go to waterproof it later on and make it and wrap it with fiberglass, it makes it easy to do. Alright, so I've got the hole cut and I went ahead and went around and sanded really good all over the deal. You can actually see I chipped this off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up some peanut butter with resin and chop strand fibers in a little resin or a little putty, and actually fill this in. Same thing with these screw holes and this little step down. I'm going to create a little fillet right here so that way the fiberglass lays down nice and neat. And what I'm going to do is try to do all that all at once, and then mix up some more resin and then roll it on all the way, and then do a wet on wet right here so it sticks really good in this little corner. So that's my plan. We'll see if that all comes together correctly. Alright, I'm making up some peanut butter here, which is a mixture of chopped strand, and then I'm using the silica. You can use micro balloons too, but you want it to be rather thick so that way it's nice and spreadable. I think that's pretty good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and spread it on the areas that need filling. Like this. And that fills that little spot, and then I'll come back with my spreader knife here and make sure it's nice and smooth in a second. And then to fill this little gap, I just go along the edge like this. You don't have to worry about being too nice and neat. And you want the chop strands in there so that way it adds a little bit of strength to it, because if you don't have the chop strands in there or thicken it, it has no strength and it's worthless. Resin alone is not worth a darn. Alright, so that's that side. Doesn't have to be too perfect as far as laying it out, but you just want it semi-smooth. And then I'm going to come over here on this side, do the same thing. You want to work pretty quick because this stuff catalyzes fairly quickly. And I already have about 4 or 5 minutes of mixing time with all the catalyst and stuff, or the mix-ins. Now this stuff can be sanded, but what I'm trying to do is keep from having to sand it. And I'm going to let this kick off a little bit and then cut me off some chop strand to go over the top, some mat, so that way it lays on while it's still semi-wet. It's called doing a wet joint. Alright, that looks good. Let's put some on our little holes right there. Mash it down real good, slide it off. Make sure you don't have too many lumps. Oops. And don't mess up what you just did, just like I did. I should be using a mask to do this, but it's nice and ventilated in here. There's lots of wind blowing, so I barely even smell this whatsoever. But you should be wearing a mask. Don't do as I do. Okay. I think that's everything as far as filling in the goof ups and so on and so forth. So I'm going to mix up some other resin without the chop strand in it. It's just clear, and I'm going to pour it over here and roll it on, and then let it kick a little bit, and then stick a whole big thing of chop strand on top, and then we'll wet it out and roll it out that way. I also wanted to show, before I get too much further, how nice the joint is between the two pieces of wood. It looks like one piece of wood. There's no, you really can't tell where it is, and there's no breaks whatsoever anywhere all the way around. So that's what you're looking for, is nice clampage. That's what we got. Alright, so right now what I'm doing is I'm actually rolling on a little bit of resin to soak into the wood, so we can semi-waterproof it before we put our chop strand on there. Don't be afraid to be liberal, so that way it soaks in really good. Oh, except don't get on your floor. Now we're going to cover this with fiberglass also. Once this kind of kicks off a little bit. I actually mixed the previous batch a little light, so it's taking a long time to kick off. This I mixed a little light too, just so it takes a little longer and soaks into the wood more. Now we're going to be like I said, we're going to be wrapping it with fiberglass, so it's not that big of a deal. Make sure you get your end grain really good. And then get down inside your little hole really good. And I'm going to attempt this time to save my rollers a little bit and wash them in acetone instead of going through so many of them, because you go through a ton. Every time you roll, it's one ruined, and those things at $6 for 4 or 5 of them, that can really add up. So if you want to try to keep your expenses under control, don't do that. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, since I've got so much resin left, is I'm going to try to flip this sucker and hit the other side too. I'm not going to worry about it getting glued to the sawhorses at all. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm just trying to get some coverage. And you don't want to ever rely on just resin to penetrate this wood, because it will crack as the boat goes under stress. So that's why you always want to put the fiberglass on top of it. Alright, here goes nothing. Let's see if we can get this flipped. Okay. Alright. I'm just going to go over this really good. Make sure I got good coverage. Okay, so I've got both sides done, and I got it tilted up just to kind of make sure everything's okay. I sure hope this stuff catalyzes. This is the first time I've used this stuff, and I'm afraid I under-catalyzed it on the first round. But you know what? It'll eventually harden sooner or later. So one thing you may have noticed that I haven't done yet is I have not cut the relief holes that go out this way for your steering to go back and forth. I wait until I get that in the boat, and then what I'll do is I'll actually drill it with my hole saw, and then actually I'll re-fiberglass it again once it's on the inside. So I haven't forgotten. I wait until I actually get the transom glued in, so that way I can line it up just right. And I think it's inch and a quarter or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but I'll look it up again and figure it out. So I'm gonna let this get tacky and make sure that it's gonna catalyze, and then I'll come out here and put some chop strand across the transom. I'll do one side then the other, and see how much we can wrap over and inside and so on and so forth to make it, you know, nice and covered. But so far so good. I tell you, I was worried about this stuff catalyzing, that I didn't mix it right, but when it kicks, it kicks. I mean, it absolutely hardened like crazy. And guys, this stuff is hot. We just did a thermal reading on this. It was 195 degrees in here. I can't even touch the bottom of this. It's so hot. It's melting the what do you call it? This little mixing cup. I mean, this stuff generates some serious amount of heat as it's kicking off. So you got to be really careful. Now, of course, it's sitting in here, so therefore it's going to generate more because it's a whole lot more there. But when you're doing big layups, heat's going to be a big problem. So yeah, keep that in mind. But golly, that is so hot. I'd forgotten how hot it gets. It seems like it's taking a while to catalyze. Oh, there you go. It's getting still sticky. I'll wait till after dinner. I got called into dinner. I got to go in there and consume. Then I'll come out here and, yeah, see this stuff right here? That's the stuff I didn't catalyze enough. And it's not. We'll see. I'm sure it'll be all right. Okay, so dinner's over, and this is actually dry, nice and neat. This stuff right here is actually just starting to firm up, so it's kind of a jelly-like substance. So I actually did pretty good getting it. You know, I mixed that a little light, then I covered the whole outside. And this is nice, and it's still sticky, but it's enough where I can get things rolling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up another batch of resin. I'm going to do 1 pint at a time. And then I'm gonna put one coat, just kind of wet it out across the top, and then I'm gonna pull off my chop strand, set it on top, and then I'm gonna start pouring on and rolling it out with my nifty little fiberglass roller here, and see how it rolls out. Ooh boy, I forgot how gnarly and nasty this job was. All right, so that's one layer of 1.5 ounce chop strand mat over the transom, just as a waterproofer. I got really good on this little area right here with no air bubbles, because this little pookie had not kicked off yet, so it was nice and easy to set it in there as wet on wet. I was able to wrap around pretty easily. I'll have to sand the back side of it where all the nasty chop strand is, but I was able to wrap around and get the end grain done pretty good with minimal air bubbles. This side, you can't see it too well, but it had kicked off a little too much, so I got a few air bubbles here and there, but it's not really tremendous amount to be worried about. I mean, that fillet line is nice and strong because it is chop strand mixed with resin. So that took me, gosh, an hour and 3 of those. So that's a quart, so 3 quarts. 3 quarts of resin mixed in there. It soaks up a lot. This chop strand does. I probably could have done this with woven, but the chop strand is a little less expensive. If you can have the patience to work with it, it works fine. Just to be able to get you some waterproofing. Now I'm still going to go over this with probably 3 layers of 1708 once it's in the boat. I'm actually going to build more on top, because the top of the keyhole is actually thinner than the bottom of the keyhole, so we want to make sure we have a uniform thickness all the way down. So with that being said, I'll wait for this to kick off, let it dry overnight, and then tomorrow I'll come and I'll flip it, sand off all the boogers and stuff on the other side, and then lay down, which should be a lot easier because it's just one piece all the way across. I don't have to worry about going down and over and all that kind of good stuff. This was the hard side. and let that kick off, sand it down, and then get in there and prep that to glue into place. I think I'm going to go with the concrete idea, which is on the wings on either side is what I'm calling them now. So the middle of it, you'll be able to use my all thread and my clamp technique, but with the outside edges, I need to be able to do something. So what I'm going to do is just really put on a lot of PL and then just put cement bags up against the side. So that's where I am right now. One thing you need to make sure of is keep your tools clean. I got my fiberglass roller. I've cleaned really good. I've cleaned my my cloth roller and my scissors. These things get nasty when you're working with them. You just got to make sure you clean them really good, otherwise you'll end up buying another $15 or $20 set of scissors. So where am I right now? We got 3 quarts of resin used, 1 pull of chop strand mat off of there, and I've got, if you look over there, you can see that's the leftover I'm saving, so whenever I need it for little small areas or something like that when I'm doing it. I'm thinking I might not use that for the deck. I might go get some woven, but I'm not quite sure yet. And I've used a couple of those little buckets. Gosh, what else? 1 of the cloth rollers, and a whole bunch of stir sticks, and some rags, and gosh, what else? There's something else I know that I used that's gone in the little dumpster over here. Oh, 1 chip brush. So, and like I said, I've got lots of chip brushes. That really helps to tack in there in the corners. Your roller works good to get in there, but this thing tacks it in the corners really well, especially these little complex bends right in here, where you got to get that stuff to really adhere. So that's it for now. My garage floor is a mess with this resin. I'll wait for it to harden, and then I'll just take gum in here with this flat shovel and just chisel it all up. But I think that's it for now. I think I ruined a good set of shoes. My wife's gonna kill me. Oh well. Enough until tomorrow.